For years, archaeologists believed Babylon had already given up all its secrets. Every temple, every brick, every carving had been studied and catalogued.
So behind me here in Babylon is the place where the ziggurat of Babylon stood.
But beneath one forgotten district, a new excavation has uncovered something no one expected. Something buried so deliberately it was never meant to be found.
Holding a tablet that was written thousands of years ago and being able to read what it says, it's an amazing feeling.
What the team discovered there has rewritten Babylon's story in the darkest way imaginable. Babylon Uncovered, the 478 artifacts. The excavation at Site 19-3 in the Al-Fayyadiyya district of Babylon began as a simple rescue mission, a race against modern development to save the last untouched section of Nebuchadnezzar's ancient capital before it vanished forever. New housing projects and road expansions were already creeping across the ancient plain, and archaeologists wanted to record whatever remained of the old city before the ground was built over for good. For the first few days, there was nothing unusual. Workers sifted through layers of dull brown soil, pulling up fragments of pottery, a few cracked bricks, and shards of tools that looked like they had long given up their purpose. Then, in the third week, the tone changed. A worker's trowel struck something solid, small, round, and faintly gleaming beneath the dust. When it was brushed clean, it turned out to be a bronze weight, still intact after nearly 3,000 years. The find stirred quiet excitement, but within hours, more pieces began to surface. Clay tablets, carved seals, bits of jewelry, and fragments of ornaments came out one after another, each discovery leading to the next. A few of the tablets looked different from the rest. Their edges were blackened, and parts of the clay had melted smooth, as if they had been exposed to fire. Others bore deep cuts across their surfaces, lines so sharp they had sliced through the writing itself. According to field notes, the damage was no accident. Whoever buried these tablets had done it on purpose, making sure that some messages would never be read again. As the artifacts were sorted, an uneasy silence settled over the trench. Among the finds were sacred objects such as small vessels used for offerings, incense cups, and fragments of ceremonial statues. Strangely, they were stored beside broken spearheads and pieces of armor. That arrangement confused everyone. In Babylonian tradition, items for worship and tools of war were never placed together. One belonged to peace and devotion, while the other represented conflict and destruction. Yet here they were, side by side, buried under the same layer of earth. According to one supervisor, the discovery felt wrong from the moment the first blade appeared. The soil was unnaturally dense, packed tighter than normal sediment, as if pressed down in haste. Workers spoke of a strange heaviness in the air. Even after long hours in the heat, the site stayed cool, and the air carried a faint metallic scent that no one could explain. The artifacts were not remains of ordinary life. They were signs of something deliberately hidden, and as the sun set over the Al-Fayyadiyya plain, the archaeologists understood they had only brushed the surface of Babylon's oldest secret. Layers beneath layers, the hidden depths. The discovery of the 478 artifacts had left the team restless. They had uncovered proof of a deliberate burial, yet no one could explain why. The question lingered in every mind. What exactly had Babylon's builders tried so hard to hide beneath the ground of Al-Fayyadiyya? To find out, the archaeologists began collecting soil samples from the deeper levels of the site. At first, everything seemed normal. Ancient cities often rebuilt over themselves after floods, fires, or wars, leaving stacked layers of history. But as the team examined the new samples, something stood out. The layers were too even, too consistent, showing none of the rough breaks or random debris that natural rebuilding leaves behind. It was as if each section of Earth had been compressed in stages, forming a pattern that hinted at deliberate burial rather than simple reconstruction. To confirm their suspicion, the team used ground-penetrating radar to see what lay below. When the images appeared on their screens, the camp fell silent. The radar showed long, empty spaces deep underground, shapes that looked like corridors and closed chambers. They were far below where any building should have survived, yet they remained perfectly stable. In normal Earth, such hollows would have collapsed long ago. Here, they were intact, sealed as if someone had built them to endure. The discovery unsettled everyone. If the radar was correct, then parts of Babylon that should have been destroyed thousands of years ago were still buried whole. The data was reviewed over and over again, but the shapes remained. After 2 days of heated discussion, the team decided to test one of the voids directly. They marked a new trench along the coordinates of the largest anomaly. Extra safety supports were brought in, and the area was cleared for careful excavation. Whatever lay beneath was clearly not a natural formation, and the team was determined to see it. The digging resumed with slow precision. As the soil came away, its texture began to change again. In some areas it was dense and packed tight, while in others it felt disturbed, as if someone had filled it in quickly. Almost every trench revealed the same odd pattern. The deeper they went, the more certain it became that an older Babylon had been buried beneath the visible one. Local workers who had grown up hearing old stories began to whisper about the deeper Babylon, a city their elders said should never be touched. The archaeologists pressed on, even as unease spread through the team. Then came the discovery that confirmed their fears. Between several layers of soil lay thin bands of ash. At first, the team thought the ash came from cooking fires or house remains. But when tested, it showed signs of extreme heat. Far beyond what any household or workshop could produce, the ash was evenly spread, forming smooth horizontal lines that ran for meters. Someone had burned the earth on purpose before covering it again. This discovery changed everything. Some members of the team thought the burning might have been part of a cleansing ritual, something done to purify the land after war, plague, or a terrible event. Others, however, began to suspect that it was not purification at all, but an attempt to seal or destroy something beneath the ground. That theory gained weight when the archaeologists uncovered wooden beams buried deep within the layers. The beams were blackened only on their lower sides, while the upper parts remained untouched. This confused everyone. If the fire had come from the surface, the top should have been burned. Instead, it looked as if the flames had come from underneath, as though something below the earth had burned its way upward. As the team continued through the compacted clay and the burned layers, their instruments began to pick up faint echoes again. The air in the camp grew quiet. No one said it aloud, but everyone understood. Whatever was buried beneath Al-Fayadia had been sealed with purpose, and they were about to disturb what its builders had fought so hard to keep hidden. Encrypted tablets and defaced writings. Before breaking into the next layer, the team decided to run another scan. The instruments picked up a cluster of dense shapes several meters beneath the surface, far too uniform to be natural rock. Guided by those readings, they began to dig carefully. As the soil thinned, the first outlines of the shapes appeared. When the trench was widened, smooth, flat edges of rectangular objects emerged from the dirt. The archaeologists worked carefully with brushes and wooden picks until the first piece came free. It was a clay tablet, still solid after thousands of years, its surface covered with fine lines of cuneiform writing. More tablets followed, each one resting close to the next, as though someone had hidden an entire archive beneath the earth. For a brief moment, the team thought they had uncovered a simple record room, lists of trade goods, temple donations, or city decrees. But the excitement faded quickly. Some tablets were in perfect condition, yet others looked mutilated. Names and prayers were scratched out halfway through, gouged with something sharp that left deep scars in the clay. A few were cracked down the middle, their inscriptions torn apart. One fragment carried a prayer that ended abruptly before the rest of the text was shattered beyond recognition. According to one of the assistants, the writing stopped so suddenly that it felt as if the scribe had fled mid-sentence. The most unsettling discovery came from a tablet whose remaining lines mentioned the watchers beneath the river. The rest had been scraped away so violently that the surface was nearly smooth. The phrase caused tension among the scholars. Some argued it was nothing more than a poetic image referring to river spirits. Others believed it hinted at something far more secret, a ritual or cult that had once been suppressed and erased from history. Linguists who examined those hidden signs noted that they were not ordinary Babylonian script. They resembled older Sumerian markings, symbols known from far earlier periods. A few of the clearest signs appeared to mean binding and containment. Scholars disagreed over whether this was accurate translation or speculation, but even the possibility left a chill among the team. One of the senior archaeologists wrote in her journal that these tablets might not have been made to preserve history at all. They might have been designed to bury it. Every broken line, every scorched surface seemed to warn against what lay below. The defaced words no longer spoke only of offerings or decrees. They whispered of fear. Still, the excavation continued. Beneath the layer of tablets, the soil grew heavier and strangely warm. Domestic ruins to secret corridors. After the discovery of the damaged tablets, the team decided to widen the excavation grid to trace where the unusual warmth in the soil was coming from. This led them into a quieter section of the site that had once been part of Babylon's residential zone. The rooms there looked ordinary. Low benches, small hearths, and fragments of reed pens that suggested a scribe's workspace. Nothing about it seemed out of place until one of the workers noticed a fine crack running across the floor. A gentle tap with a trowel made the sound echo back hollow. The noise cut through the afternoon heat, and everyone turned. The slab was carefully mapped and then lifted piece by piece. Beneath it, a narrow staircase appeared, spiraling downward into darkness. The first breath that rose from below was cold and metallic. It stung eyes and throats even through protective masks. According to field notes, several workers stepped back, uneasy at the way the air carried a sharp, sour tang that felt wrong for buried earth. They descended slowly, one person at a time, documenting every step. The stairwell walls were smooth and tightly cut, showing precise tool marks but no decoration or inscription. In ancient Babylon, most builders left something, a sign, a line of writing, even a simple blessing. But here, there was nothing. The silence of the stone unsettled the archaeologists. Whoever built this passage had taken care to leave no name attached to it. At the base of the stairway, the team reached a narrow corridor that did not open freely. Instead, it was sealed shut. Layer after layer of mud bricks had been arranged across the opening in geometric patterns. The construction looked deliberate, like the lid of a container meant never to be opened. Some archaeologists believed it mimicked the sealing of ritual jars used to trap or protect what lay inside. The precision was unlike anything seen in other domestic sites. It was the work of builders who knew they were closing something important or dangerous. When the removal began, the first layers came off easily. Then the smell changed. A faint sulfur scent drifted out, followed by a wave of rot that made several team members step back. By the third layer, the odor had grown unbearable. Work halted twice for ventilation. According to the site medic's report, a few workers felt dizzy and complained of pressure in their chests. Once the air cleared, the supervisors ordered respirators for everyone and continued slowly, brick by brick. After several meters, the sealed corridor ended at a wall of packed clay and gravel. It did not look like a collapse. The fill had been arranged with care, large stones placed at the bottom and finer clay pressed tightly on top. Laboratory analysis later confirmed what the team already suspected. The blockage was deliberate. This was not a ruined passage. It was a space that someone long ago had purposely filled and sealed. As the team loosened the compacted soil, the texture under their brushes changed. Something inside the fill reflected light. At first, they thought it was a mineral inclusion, but a closer look proved otherwise. The pale curve belonged to bone. It was small, smooth, and unmistakably human. The discovery stopped everyone cold. For a few moments, no one spoke. Bones inside a wall made no sense. The more they cleared, the more fragments appeared, glinting through the packed clay. Some were clustered together, others scattered as if mixed with the fill. The workers grew uneasy. Some whispered that the bricks had not been built to keep people out, but to keep something in. Whatever the truth, the first open space beyond the barrier offered no comfort. The pale fragments on the floor did not lie randomly. They were organized. They formed straight lines and neat groups, arranged with deliberate care, as if someone long ago had placed them there for a reason the team was never meant to learn. The bone catalog, finger sets and family clusters. When the last wall of clay was broken, light spilled into the chamber and every sound stopped. The floor ahead was pale and uneven, covered not with dust or artifacts, but with bones, hundreds of them. At first, no one moved. The air was still and heavy, carrying a faint odor of metal and old earth. It felt as though the room had been waiting to be opened. The pattern of the bones made no sense. They were not lying as bodies or scattered by time. They were sorted. Finger bones lay together in long lines, arranged as if someone had once counted them one by one. The larger joints rested to the left, the smaller ones to the right. Near the wall, smaller piles formed tight clusters that seemed to belong to children. Ribs, jaws, and vertebrae were stacked neatly in corners. Every section was separated by thin strips of packed clay, like invisible borders dividing one type of bone from another. Archaeologists documented the scene in silence. The cuts along the bones were sharp and consistent. Forensic analysts confirmed they had been made after death. The remains were not shaped by decay or time. Someone had separated and stored them with care. In one log entry, a technician wrote that it looked less like a grave and more like a collection. Chemical testing brought more questions. Samples from several bones showed traces of iron oxide and resin. To the scientists, this could mean blood sealed with an early preservative. To others, it looked like something ritualistic. According to reports, the combination of blood residue and plant resin had appeared before in Mesopotamian rituals meant to bind the soul or preserve it between worlds. Nothing in the chamber, however, hinted at reverence. There were no inscriptions, no offerings, and no sign of mourning. As the cataloging continued, tension in the team deepened. Two younger assistants refused to re-enter the room after the first night. They described the scene as too clean, too deliberate, as if the bones had been organized to make a statement. One of them wrote in her field notes, "These were not buried, they were arranged to stay powerless." Local historians who later reviewed the photographs saw an eerie connection. Ancient Mesopotamian texts mention a rite called the disarming of the soul, in which the hands of the dead were symbolically separated to keep their spirits from returning. Some believed the clustered finger bones under Al-Fayadia matched that forgotten practice too closely to dismiss as coincidence. By the end of the week, the chamber was no longer listed as a burial site. In the field report, it received a new title: Human Storage Cavity, Organized Remains. The meaning was clear enough. These people had not been honored, they had been contained. During the final survey, workers noticed that the ground beneath the bone layer had started to darken. Under the work lights, a thin sheen appeared on the surface, reflecting faintly, like damp metal. Some said it was moisture from deeper layers. Others whispered it was something else seeping upward. Whatever it was, it spread slowly across the floor, a quiet signal that the earth below was not finished giving up its secrets. The silent pools, toxic liquids, and odor. The shimmer that appeared on the chamber floor was first dismissed as groundwater, but when the team tried to dig a drainage channel, their shovels sank into wet clay that glistened strangely under the light. The surface looked oily, almost alive, and the smell that rose from it made everyone step back. It was sharp and metallic, mixed with a foul trace of sulfur that caught in the throat. Breathing became difficult within minutes. Masks were brought in, but even with filters, the odor burned the nose and eyes. When lamps were lowered closer to the surface, the team saw what they had uncovered. Beneath the bones and packed clay were shallow basins carved directly into the rock. Each basin held a thin layer of dark liquid that reflected light in shifting colors, green, blue, and black all at once. No one could tell how deep it went. The liquid did not ripple like normal water. It clung to itself, thick and heavy, as though it did not want to be disturbed. Samples were taken carefully with gloves and glass vials. In the field lab, the results came back within hours. The liquid contained high levels of mercury, arsenic, and lead compounds. Even a few drops could cause poisoning. The concentrations were far beyond what could have occurred naturally. According to Dr. Al-Mutar's report, the mixture was chemically deliberate, a combination made with intent. But the intent itself remained unclear. Some believed it was a kind of ancient defense, a trap for grave robbers or invaders. Inhaling the vapor or touching the substance could have killed anyone who entered the chamber unprepared. Others argued that it was symbolic. Ancient Babylonian texts often describe rivers of darkness in the underworld, paths that separated the living from the dead. These toxic pools, they said, might have been built to mirror that myth, turning the underground passage into a literal boundary between worlds. As the excavation continued, several workers reported strange sensations near the basins. According to unverified field notes, the liquid sometimes quivered when approached, even when the air was still. One geologist suggested it was caused by shifting pressure underground. Another thought it might be chemical reactions with trapped gases. Whatever the cause, the movement was enough to make the team uneasy. Protective gear became mandatory. The sound of air filters filled the chamber, but the silence between breaths was heavier still. No one spoke much while working near the pools. It felt as though the place itself resisted intrusion. The floor was slick, and every step seemed to echo too loudly. The deeper the team went, the stronger the sense that this part of Babylon had not been meant for the living at all. By the end of the week, the area was classified as hazardous. Only a handful of specialists were allowed inside. The rest of the crew watched from the upper platform as sealed containers were lifted out of the pit one by one. The toxic liquid had turned the ground into something unearthly, a place that looked more like a warning than a discovery. And yet, even this was not the end. Beneath the lowest basin, radar scans picked up a solid object deeper still, a barrier that seemed too thick to be part of natural rock. Whatever was sealed below the mercury and poison had been buried with intent. What came next would push the excavation into horror. The Vault of Horror. The discovery of the toxic pools had already shaken the team, but they knew the excavation could not end there. Beneath the chemical basin, the ground sounded hollow again. The radar image showed a solid mass blocking the deepest chamber. It appeared thicker and more uniform than any of the previous barriers. When the archaeologists reached it, they saw that it was not made of clay or mud brick. It was stone dense, smooth, and tightly sealed along the edges. The wall measured nearly 2 meters in thickness. Its surface was covered with carvings unlike anything previously seen at Babylon. The markings were shallow but precise, a repeating series of symbols that matched those found on the defaced tablets from the upper layers. The linguists recognized several of the glyphs. They translated to meanings such as binding, containment, and underwatch. One tablet fragment recovered earlier even contained a phrase that now made grim sense. The ones beneath the river must not be freed. The archaeologists hesitated to open the chamber, but after weeks of preparation, the team decided to proceed. Each stone was pried loose with careful leverage. The moment the last section shifted, a rush of foul air burst out. It was thick, heavy, and smelled of ammonia and rot. Masks went on quickly, yet the stench clung to clothing and skin. According to the log written that night, 2 workers vomited before the air began to clear. Inside, the beam of the first light fell upon shapes that did not make sense. Along the walls stood skeletal figures, positioned upright, as if frozen in motion. Their bones were twisted, some with arms bent behind their backs, others with jaws wired shut by thin strands of bronze. The binding metal had corroded, but still held shape. The skeletons had not fallen naturally, they had been posed. Closer inspection revealed that many of the remains were grouped together in alcoves. One corner held what looked like a cage made from human vertebrae, interlocked into a circular frame. Within it, smaller skulls were trapped, their bones fused with a dark resin that glistened under the light. Chemical residue on the walls suggested the same poisonous mixture of mercury and lead found above. The air itself felt unstable, as if breathing it too long was dangerous. In the center of the vault, a circular pit descended into darkness. Around its rim, the floor was etched with a spiral of cuneiform text. When translated, the lines read, "The ones beneath must never rise." The words circled inward like a command, or a prayer repeated endlessly. The pit was deep enough that even the strongest lamp could not reveal the bottom. Some believed it was symbolic, others feared it was not. The silence in the vault became unbearable. According to unverified reports, the lead archaeologist stood motionless for several minutes before speaking. His voice was barely audible in the recording made that day. "This is not a tomb," he said. "This is a warning." The chamber was sealed again after only a short time. Officially, the excavation team called it a contained ritual space. Unofficially, several members refused to return underground. Some believed Babylon's builders had not tried to honor their dead, but to imprison something far worse. The evidence of burning, the toxic pools, and now the restrained skeletons all pointed to a single conclusion. Whatever was buried there had terrified the ancient city enough for its people to bury it beneath layer after layer of earth. When the reports were filed, a few pages were marked as restricted and withheld from public archives. According to one insider, the final notes described faint vibrations that continued beneath the sealed pit for several minutes after the team withdrew. No explanation was ever released. Beneath Al-Fayyadiya's soil, Babylon's last secret had surfaced, not a monument to its greatness, but proof that some parts of its past had been buried because they were never meant to be found. What do you think the archaeologists truly uncovered beneath Babylon? Was it a forgotten ritual site, or something far more disturbing that the ancients tried to keep buried? Share your thoughts in the comments. We would love to hear your theory.